Muskies rock! At the Ottawa River Muskie Factory.
Wait, I'm not ready. Too late. Oh well. We'll do our best anyway. Thanks to Slide and the Drift for rocking us into another Muskie Monday seminar series, week 15. What a busy week we have. Muskies on the fly, gobies, Bluefish Canada, the YouTube debut of What Lies Below, and the YouTube debut of Setting the Hook Ottawa River Edition. All of those in the next 90 to 105 minutes, if my math is good. Hopefully, because that Setting the Hook debut is at 8:45, and Brent Bocek is going to hand you off to that later on tonight. Fishing is a growing sport. Wow, last year with COVID, almost 50% more licenses sold in most states and provinces across North America. So fishing is growing big time. And in fishing, the two areas of major growth, musky fishing and fly fishing. And so musky fishing, that is a hard fish to catch. A lot of work. And fly fishing, that's the hardest way to catch anything and a lot of work. And so you can probably figure out why a muskie has quickly become the it fish in the fly fishing world. A lot of work, a hard fish to catch, and the ultimate reward. And who better to tell us about why a muskie is the it fish in the fly fishing world than the new fly fisher team? Bill Spicer has been on the new fly fisher for over 20 years. He has fished the far reaches of this country for everything. He's fished everywhere for anything, and he's caught a bunch of muskies, and he's watched this fish grow from a novelty into a mainstay in the fishing world. So we've got Bill along, and then sometimes guest and sometimes host for the new fly fisher. My buddy Jamie Pastilli is also here. These guys are going to take us through why fly fishing for muskies is all the rage these days. Dr. Sean Landsman, we're going to get to him in a few minutes on Ask the Biologist this week. Very topical in conjunction with the article that came out in the National Post newspapers yesterday, the Sun, the Citizen in Ottawa, a bunch in Toronto, elsewhere in the country on gobies, the scourge of the goby. And so we're going to look at gobies tonight with Dr. Sean. Oh, there it is. Yeah, that was in the Citizen yesterday. That's Matt Windle from the River Institute, and we're going to look at why gobies are such a big deal on the St. Lawrence. They're in the Rideau River. We're going to talk about what that means, and we'll get on to that in just a couple of minutes. Lawrence Gunther is going to come on. My friend from my Shimano brother, my friend from Bluefish Canada, somebody I've enjoyed fishing with for about 15 years ago. Lawrence is the founder of Bluefish Canada. Bluefish focuses on fish health, on water quality, on inspiring the next generation of conservation-minded anglers, and he's got the debut of his spectacular documentary, What Lies Below, that's going from the documentary circuit for the last bunch of years to public viewing. So we're going to see some of that and talk about that. Let me get my thank yous in as always. Thank you, the viewer. You drive what we do. And tonight I have a special request from you because we are doing a segment on gobies. And Dr. John Farrell is going to talk about the St. Lawrence muskie issues, which are largely due to gobies and other issues as well. But if you have a goby story, if there's gobies in your river, if gobies are new in your lake or your area, please write in and tell us what you see and where you are. It's a new problem, and everybody's trying to get a handle on this. So help us out tonight. Send in your comments. Thanks as always to the Muskie Factory Baits team, Mike Spratt, working hard in the basement and watching this on a little screen right now, as always. Lisa Goodyear, our producer extraordinaire, guide extraordinaire, holy mackerel, is Lisa busy this week getting ready for the Muskie Odyssey this weekend? 20 presentations, multiple people going out to different channels and all over the place. It's a pretty easy week for you, right?
Yeah, it's going to be an intense weekend, but it'll be worth it. It's a
Oh,
great
yeah.
cause, great group of people, and I'm excited.
Yeah, Muskie's 24/7, even in your sleep when you got this much to do this week. So, and you worked with Lawrence at Bluefish for a long time. You've got the company jersey on tonight from
Yeah, I'm wearing my uniform tonight. I haven't been able
Bluefish,
to
I
wear
can
this
see.
with all the shows being canceled, but I've been volunteering for Bluefish for, I think it's actually coming up on 5 years this year, and it actually changed my life. It's the reason now why I'm sitting here with you and why I'm a full-time guide. So Lawrence, started off as volunteering. Now he's a friend, and I'm just really lucky to have him in my life.
Wow. Well, Lawrence is a fantastic. I'll introduce him to you a little bit shortly. So thanks as always, Lisa. Lisa will stay behind the scenes and answer your questions. Mike Kadura, also behind the scenes and answering your questions. How's Mikey doing tonight?
I'm real good, John. I'm excited. Fly fishermen guys, man.
Fly fishing guys, what do you got to, the fly fishermen as a guide? Fly fishermen are the most work that a guide can have. True?
Yeah, well, it is true, because coaching them and how they have to do in boat position. And I'll tell you, though, it is exciting and rewarding when they hook up on a fly. Any muskie's great, but muskies on a fly, when you coach a guy or you watch these guys and how hard they work on a fly, man, it is something else. So I'm really excited about tonight's show. I plan on learning a lot myself.
Absolutely. And who better than the guys that we have tonight, Bill and Jamie. So
That's for
fantastic.
sure.
Thanks to Shimano, as always. We'll talk after, Mike. Thanks to Andre Lalone, Crestliner Boats, Mercury Motors, to Suick Lures. Next week on the Muskie Monday seminar series, Mike Suick is going to come here. We're going to talk jerk baits. We're going to talk soft plastics. We're going to talk the history of jerk baits, and who better than somebody whose grandfather invented one of the first and one of the greatest of all time. So join us next week. Chaos Tackle, as always. Sail, Canada's outdoor superstore. I wanted to throw a shout out to Cam and Phil. They're two exceptional fly guys, fanatical fly guys, and they crush it on the Rideau. They crush it downtown. They crush it in any section on the Rideau on flies for muskies. So they're two local guys you can go and get some really good information from, as well as writing to us or sending questions to us, because we answer them all. Thanks to Muskies Canada. Muskie Factory Baits loves Muskies Canada so much we give $2 through every bait sold to support research through Muskies Canada. And the Odyssey this weekend, like I told you, greatest learning experience, all the amazing amount of teachers, 20 different presentations, the best learning all in one place, anywhere in the world for Muskie this year. So there it is, the Muskies Canada Odyssey this weekend. You got to be there. And the Muskie Trader Muskie Symposium 2 weeks after that. Again, I think these guys are raising like over 20 grand already for research. Hot topic, much needed topic. And we've got great speakers at this event, gonna tie the real link between research, learning, and how it comes back to benefit you as the angler. So Sean and I are both going to be speaking at that event as well. So much musky learning. Just before we get to Sean, I wanted to throw a shout out to Toby Gilbert and David O'Sullivan, two guys I've seen out on the river around here for years. Toby, well, one of the best fly throwers I've ever seen. Two of the guys who've been pioneering in fly fishing around Ottawa. So with those shout outs, we will move on to Dr. Landsman and Ask the Biologist, and a very timely topic, the goby. And I understand, Sean, that you've got a student who you'd actually had doing some research or pre-research on gobies for you this year.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
wow.
he's actually watching right now. So hey, Sean, we had like an over hour conversation earlier today, just going over some of the cliff notes, if you will, of all the research that Sean's been doing. I think he needed to read around 90 academic papers. I mean, a lot. So he's handled it very, very well. So yeah, and I'm particularly interested to hear about the fly fishing too tonight, because you're talking about Cam, and I don't know if I don't know if his buddy Phil was on the boat last year, but Hedrick and I saw Cam and a buddy of his on the boat, and we didn't watch them put 5 muskies in the boat, but when we finally got to the river, they're like, yeah, we had 4, and then later we watched them catch a 5th up to like 47 inches or something, and we were just astounded. I think we got a walleye, and that was it. But it was no shade intended for all the walleye lovers out there. I love me a good walleye too, but I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Anyway, I'll never forget that. It's definitely piqued my interest. But yeah, we'll talk about round gobies today. They are definitely a topic, worth touching on. People that have experienced fishing bodies of water where gobies are present, probably have kind of a vested interest in understanding a little bit more about round gobies. And of course, now they're in the Rideau River as of 2019. I'll talk a little bit about that too, and potentially may end up in the Ottawa River at some point. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we'll go over some of the kind of basic biology around gobies, and then talk about why they're a concern, and what fish species might be most heavily impacted, and like things that might keep them a little bit at bay, like glimmers of hope there. There's certainly a lot of uncertainty around their potential impact in some of the systems like the Rideau River and potentially the Ottawa River. But needless to say, we'll cover some of that stuff. So the main concerns that especially anglers have, but also ecologists and biologists alike have with round gobies is their competition with native species. So round gobies, I'll touch on this a little bit more in a second, but they stick to the bottom. That's it. And so they're going to be directly competing with other species that use that habitat on the bottom. So things like darters, sculpins, these small bottom dwelling species. There's also other concerns about like the ripple effect that can occur from their proliferation in a system, and that might allow for other native species in a system to expand in abundance. So we see this with some like open water minnow species, and an example of that might be emerald shiners, but other kinds of like shiner minnow-like species that tend to forage in open water environments might actually benefit from from an introduction of round gobies. We also know that there are some kind of unintended benefits of having round gobies for some species, particularly for things like smallmouth bass. YOY, so that's the young of year smallmouth bass in areas with round goby tend to grow faster and larger than young of year smallmouth bass in systems without round goby. So they can become a prey source. So your predators can switch to them eventually after they learn that they're a viable food source and there's enough of them around. But probably the biggest thing that at least musky anglers and researchers would be concerned about is egg predation with round gobies. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So what about their distribution and where are they native? So we talk about them as an invasive species, which implies that they came from somewhere else. They're actually native to Eastern Europe, native to areas like the Black and Caspian Seas. And so they would have come over here through the ballast water of cargo ships. So these ships would have sucked up a bunch of water from the Black and Caspian Seas, depending on where that first ship originated from, sucked up all this ballast water to help balance the boat. And once they got into the Great Lakes and into the St. Clair River in particular, in order to, when they're like offloading cargo and to rebalance the ship a bit, they need to let go of some of that ballast water. And so that's how you get a movement of stuff out of the ballast tanks of cargo ships and into a new body of water. It happens with, unfortunately, some frequency, especially in the Great Lakes. So you can see here, that's kind of the distribution of where they are in North America, particularly in the U.S. They're in all the Great Lakes. I've also added a little bracket there. They're in the St. Lawrence River as well. And of course, we'll talk about that in a bit too. If you ever come across this weird looking little mottled fish that doesn't really look like a minnow species that you've ever been familiar with, the most easily identifiable feature of a round goby is if you lift the front part of the dorsal fin, there's a black dot on the back end of that front half of the dorsal fin. That is your like key identifying feature that this is a round goby. There are some native sculpin species that you might on a rare occasion come across. We definitely don't want those to die. But if you come across a round goby, they're an invasive species and don't belong here. So deal with them as you see fit. The maximum size for round gobies is only about 8 inches. So they're not a particularly large fish. They're usually between 2.5 to 4 inches long. They don't live that long. Most of them are between 1 and 2 years old. The number that survive, or the percent survival, declines rapidly above 2 years of age. One thing that makes them kind of different than a lot of other fish, they actually don't have a swim bladder. So they basically just hop around on the bottom. They have relatively poor swimming abilities. I'll talk about that again in a little bit. Because they don't have a swim bladder, it means they can't like hang out in the mid-water column areas. They have to stay on the river and lake bottom. So they're confined to the bottom of water bodies. In terms of their reproductive biology, gobies can spawn over a fairly broad season. They have a fairly broad spawning season and can spawn anywhere from 1 to 2 times during that season. So typically that's like May to the very beginning of September. So you're looking at, the summer months are probably your prime times. Their eggs are actually very sticky. So the photo on the bottom right there, you can see there's little like filaments coming off of the end of it. Those are the adhesive filaments. And in the photo just above that, that's a mass of eggs on a piece of pipe that's been taken out of the water. And you can kind of see those eggs are sticking upright. And then just above that, that's actually a guarding male. And that male is guarding some eggs that have been placed on the underside of a piece of pipe. And so if you look closely, you can see little light dots on the top of that pipe there. And then the top drawing there, that's a female. It's a drawing of the female that would have flipped herself upside down and actually pushed the eggs out onto the pipe. And because they're really sticky, they just like stick to anything that they touch. They also kind of have one dominant reproductive strategy, and that is there's like a big male and he hangs out and he guards the eggs. So kind of like, think like bass. But there's also this interesting alternative reproductive strategy where they've got these little sneaky dudes that sit on the edge of the nest. And when they see a female come into the nest, they try and dart in there and steal fertilization and then dart away before getting attacked by the dominant male. Bluegills do this too. So kind of an interesting reproductive ecology. They're very flexible. So their clutch sizes actually aren't particularly big. But what they maybe make up for in a lack of egg numbers is really attentive parental care and some nifty things that they can do for spawning purposes. So for their diets, okay, so this is where a lot of anglers might be a little interested to know kind of what do they eat. Believe it or not, fish eggs actually make up a relatively small percentage of the diet. And that kind of makes sense because, fish that are spawning, they don't do that for, they only have like a small window during the year. Even when you look at different fish species within a body of water, a lot of them will spawn in the spring. few of them spawn in the fall, even fewer spawn in the winter. So most of that spawning is going to occur between spring and summer, and the fish are going to have to eat like throughout the year, right? So what then do they eat if they're not eating a predominance of eggs? They're actually mostly eating bugs, and that makes sense because where do they live? They live on the bottom. What lives on the bottom? Lots of bugs. So it's it's what's around. But they're very opportunistic. So yeah, if there's fish eggs around, they're going to eat some fish eggs, and fish eggs are full of lots of good stuff. They will also eat small mussels too. So like juvenile mussels, sometimes called spat. And so this is kind of a concern. We have a continuing trend of decreasing native mussel species in a lot of places. And so round gobies might have an impact there, but they don't eat, as it turns out, they don't eat too many of them, in part because they're just really hard to digest. It's a lot of shell. And so, they're not actually consuming a lot of convertible tissue. It's mostly shell, right? So they don't eat too much of those. But fish eggs, they definitely will eat them. Things that spawn in the spring are probably most vulnerable to goby predation as well, especially those that spawn in shallow littoral zones. So it's a shallow, like near the shoreline kind of areas, as opposed to deep water stuff. They prefer rocks, especially for spawning, but that said, they can be found over lots of different habitats. But generally speaking, the rockier the lake or river is, the more potentially conducive it will be for gobies. They tend to not be big fans of soft bottoms, so like mud and silt and muck and lots of heavily vegetated areas that might be growing on soft substrates. They tend to avoid those areas. So in fact, those kinds of areas could be a bit of a barrier to them, like moving quickly through a system to colonize it. Not necessarily a complete barrier, but might impede their movement. And in terms of their actual abilities to move, their physical abilities to move, they're actually pretty bad swimmers. And again, that's because they have like no swim bladder. Their fins aren't particularly conducive for moving very quickly. At maximum, this is like after doing a lot of searching, my student and myself as well, to try and find some other interesting numbers. About the maximum I found was around 15 kilometers total movement in a given year. That's like the absolute maximum. Most of the time, they're probably moving less than a kilometer. They just really don't move that much, but they will move a lot during that juvenile stage. And so that's the stage I'd be maybe the most leery of in terms of their potential to colonize new habitats, would be at that juvenile stage when they're just drifting in the currents. And so if you're in a river system, river water flows in a unidirectional manner from upstream to downstream. So they could potentially colonize downstream areas fairly quickly, depending on what the currents are like where these adults are spawning. So what would be some barriers to movement? Because they're such bad swimmers, they have a hard time handling fast flowing water. So dams, fishways, anything where you've got some kind of like fast water where there's some fast water occurring. We might call these velocity barriers. And these will, at the very least, slow, if not outright block movement upstream. And so then in that kind of a situation, the only way they can really get upstream of something would be if they're moved upstream. Like if there is no fishway, nothing that connects a downstream area to an upstream, is a big, huge dam, like that's the Moses Saunders Dam there. The only way they're going to get upstream is through people moving them, probably incidentally through like bait bucket transfers. And so that's probably one of the main ways they actually can move into new habitats, is people just unwittingly have them in a bait bucket. And so we got to really be careful about how we dispose of our bait. Okay, so let's talk about gobies and the fish that we're all here for to hear about. And gobies and muskies, the thing with muskies that makes them a little bit vulnerable is they are a littoral zone predator. They do spawner. They do spawn in shallow water. And the other thing that works against muskies is that they don't guard their eggs. Unlike a bass, if there's marauding gobies or something, a bass might be able to eat them or just, shoo them away. Generally don't eat stuff, but they will try and shoo them away. Muskies, though, they just drop the eggs in the milt and the eggs fertilize, and then muskies just keep swimming. That's it. So gobies are also known to consume musky eggs. So that has been confirmed, I believe, and they are also known to carry VHS as well. So they're also known to be a reservoir for VHS, which is viral hemorrhagic septicemia virus. This is a study. It's a figure from a study by John Farrell, famed St. Lawrence River muskie biologist and researcher. And, in the St. Lawrence, especially the upper St. Lawrence around the Thousand Islands area, Gananoque, that population is not doing very well. It's the basis for that article that John spoke about earlier in the show, at the intro. John and his colleagues correlated an increase in abundance of gobies with a concomitant decline in the muskie population. We do have to keep in mind that this is just a correlation. It's, we need to be a little bit careful about how we interpret this. Correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. And we also know that at the time, VHS had hit the St. Lawrence muskie population in that upper St. Lawrence area. And I made a note of where that was there. 2006 to 2008 is when we saw that VHS die off. But that black line shows an increase in round goby numbers. And so, you've got muskies going like this and gobies going like this. And so, it's kind of hard to ignore that association there. So it's likely that their presence definitely doesn't help. Whether it's the sole reason for their decline, I don't think that's the case. But, you might have a situation in the St. Lawrence where this is like a perfect storm. Population knocked back significantly by VHS with the removal of a bunch of spawning sized individuals, and then add on top of that additional pressure from this new invasive species. Gobies in the Rideau River, again, this is a relatively new thing. It was found in 2019. I always thought they were found by Carleton students, but I was just texting with Jordana Bergman, the PhD candidate that's working with myself and some others on muskies on the Rideau system. And she actually said that they were found by a consulting firm that was doing some work within the Edmonds Lock down in Smiths Falls and found like 17 of them. So they're confirmed down and around Smiths Falls, but their distribution elsewhere still remains uncertain. I don't think they've been found anywhere else, at least to our knowledge. So we have some questions about whether, locks can actually impede their movement. They, probably impede them. Do they outright block them? Maybe not, but they, should definitely, I would think anyway, be able to slow them down. That would be my prediction. And does the Rideau possess the right habitat for round gobies? And we know that there's areas certainly where there's lots of muck and sand and silt and stuff like that, soft bottom habitats. We also know that there's plenty of areas where there's a lot of rocks too. So, and we do know that they can go into tributaries. And so there's lots of different little tributaries that come into the Rideau that could be potential spawning habitat. I'm thinking like the Jock River in the Echoland stretch has lots of rocks right at where it joins in with the Rideau. And so that could potentially be spawning habitat. So, if we're talking gobies in the Rideau, we have to talk potential for gobies in the Ottawa because the Rideau connects with the Ottawa. And, frankly, it's probably at this point, it's probably a matter of time before they get into the Ottawa. You just have to look at downstream dispersal. It could be many, many, many years before they get into the Ottawa. But it's likely that at some point they're going to get in there either through natural movement into the river or, someone's going to go and catch some bait out of the Rideau and then go over to the Ottawa and fish for catfish or walleye or something and inadvertently introduce round goby into the Ottawa River. The question remains, if they will do well in the system or if they won't. And I do want to leave you with a couple things to consider that might tamper some of your fears or dampen some of your fear, not tamper, but dampen some of your fears. Two things. The Ottawa, we know, has relatively low calcium, and that may be a good thing. And that's one of the reasons muscle biologists suspect that zebra mussels haven't taken hold in, at least in any significant manner, in the Ottawa River. Gobies don't do very well, according to Sean, when we were talking earlier, don't do very well in water with calcium concentrations less than about 8 milligrams per liter. Then Sean today, he and I, when we were talking earlier, we went online, found some water quality data, and there are a couple of sampling stations that were active in 2019, water quality sampling stations in 2019 that showed the calcium concentrations in the Ottawa River in these two locations, one around Fitzroy and the other up by the Mattawa, had calcium concentrations around 8 or less. So that bodes well for the fact that, you know, having low calcium concentrations might mean that even if they do get in, the juveniles don't develop properly, and it might, stunt the population. It might hamper their ability to really take hold. The other thing is that, especially on the lower Ottawa, there's lots of muck and soft bottom habitat in the lower Ottawa, and we know that they don't like that. And so that figure on the bottom there, that's from a paper that looked at the distribution of gobies in the lower St. Lawrence River. So I flagged that section here. That's Lac St. Pierre, and Lac St. Pierre has an abundance of like muddy, vegetated, silty shoals, shallow areas. And in that area of the St. Lawrence River, the fact that you don't see any orange or red dots there means that there's very few gobies that they find in that stretch of river. Those little black dots on the north shore there of the St. Lawrence and Lac St. Pierre there, that means they didn't find any gobies, even when they went out to try and find them. So, there may be some habitat aspects of the lower Ottawa River that may not be particularly conducive for round goby, and that might be a good thing. And we certainly know that the lower Ottawa holds a lot of muskies, and so that same kind of habitat might actually not be particularly good for round goby. And of course, there's also concerns about bait bucket transfers too. So again, if you're out there fishing with live bait for whatever species you're targeting, remember to dispose of your bait properly, and that is to not dump live fish back in the river. Dispose of them onshore, away from the body of water that you were fishing. Big shout out to my undergrad student Sean there he is explaining today. Unbeknownst to him, I took a screenshot of him while he was explaining something to me about round goby biology. So Sean, and most of this information came from Sean, and I'm learning from him, and so it's been an enjoyable process. So good job, Sean. I know you're out there watching, as well as your family. So yeah, if as always, if you have any more questions, send them to John, or you can email them to me. You can also hit me up on the socials, I guess as the kids call it these days. I don't know. Instagram, Twitter. Yeah. So hopefully that was educational for everybody.
Fantastic. You are the kids these days, just so you know, Sean. So it's all about perspective. Fantastic. Gobies is like a 1 hour topic that you did a really great job on in 20 minutes, but I got a giant list of questions and a bunch of amazing people waiting. I gotta ask a couple. Yeah. We talked about them being around Smiths Falls. So is Big Rito Lake, we know they do well in rocky sections of rivers. What about Big Rito Lake? That's really close to Smiths Falls.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone knows if they're in there yet. Moving upstream in a river system will be a lot harder for gobies than moving downstream, but they certainly can move upstream, and they're known to move upstream. They might be the bigger individuals that are able to do that as opposed to the small ones. So there might be a bit of a delay there until the first fish to have established in the in the Rito actually get into the Big Rito. but it's got a lot of rocky habitat. You know, there's a lot of elements of the Big Rideau that remind me of like lakes in upstate New York and things like that do have gobies, and even aspects that remind me a bit of the Great Lakes too. So, yeah.
You know, I was reading the comments from last week, and I was reading Stephen Cook's comments, and he said rocky habitat is ideal for gobies, and it was like 2 hours later, because I processed things slowly, that it just went, oh no, that's so much of the Rideau River. And so, you know, it's scary to think about, certainly something to watch. To say something positive, I hear the Muskies are spitting up big gobies. You were talking 8 inches. I know from looking at some of Farrell's, I believe I listened to a talk that Farrell or one of his students gave, and they were talking about 10 and 11-inch gobies in the Thousand Islands section.
Well, everything grows bigger in the Thousand Islands in the St. Lawrence.
Yeah, and because it's the most ideal habitat there is, period. And, you know, Billy Barber talks about his big muskie spitting up big gobies these days. So, you know, maybe the muskies will learn to eat them, and it'll be a great thing, just like it is for the smallmouth. We'll stay on that positivity. So fantastic as always, Sean.
Awesome.
Thank you. Lawrence Gunther. I have a proper introduction written up for Lawrence Gunther of Bluefish Canada. My friend for 15 years, a promoter of sustainable fishing, an environmental advocate, a well-traveled tournament angler, a motivational speaker and educator, an inventor of the blind fishing boat, a man filled with passion beyond. And the first time I took Lawrence out to go muskie fishing, it was a while back, and he hadn't mastered a bait caster, so he wanted to bring his 11-foot carp rod, and it had 50-pound test, and we were going to take Lawrence casting for muskies. This is what he wanted to do. So I put him up in the front of the boat, and I told him 11 o'clock, 60 feet, and then I ducked. And I said 2 o'clock, 100 feet, and then I ducked. And that was how we went through our first day together out in the boat. And it was an amazing day of stories and fishing. And we caught the smallest muskie of the year that day. I don't think it was 4 pounds. And I took that fish out of the net and handed it to Lawrence, and watching him and his joy and his unique appreciation for this fish, the smell, the thickness of the slime, the texture, overall shape. It was just a really rewarding experience for me. So Lawrence been one of my favorite people to hang out with for a long time. We've got a video clip before we bring him out, I think.
I think people need to know. People need to know what's going on. People just don't have enough information, and I want to see it. I want to see it firsthand myself. I think that could really help the situation in terms of creating a deeper understanding of what we're up against here and what we need to do.
Most of the destruction to the environment is under the water.
I think anything you can't see them and you don't know they're there, then you don't really care about them.
The fish is the silent majority. It doesn't say a word. It never complains.
And I believe strongly in local knowledge.
We grew up fishing for 3 days a week. We haven't done that for 40 years.
And those are the people I want to talk to, and I want to be a voice for them.
There's a lot of young people now that's had to move away because there's no work here. And years ago, when we had our ground fishing, our lobster fishing, and everything that was strong.
I don't want to be a lone voice. I want to speak on behalf of the people who are being affected directly. The people who make a living from the water, who depend on the water for their food, for their livelihood. I want to help get their voice out to whoever, to the public. And the public can then, in turn, will put pressure on the politicians to put pressure on the industry to do it differently, to do it better.
That is a very cool and well-made documentary, my friend Lawrence Gunther. Really great to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me on, John.
pleasure. You're doing double duty tonight, aren't you? Because you do CFN Live every Monday as well. So
yeah.
Thank you for fitting us into your busy schedule with all that you do.
Well, John, you introduced me to the Ottawa River. I hadn't been living in Ottawa that long at that time. And to get, I knew about the Ottawa River. I rafted the Ottawa River. I swam in the Ottawa River. I've fished in the Ottawa River, but to really get to know the Ottawa River, you were my man. And we discovered so much together. That's why you inspired me to make that documentary, because it was the first story I thought about doing. Of all the 10 stories we covered in that documentary across Canada, up into the Arctic, it was this sewage and what you could see floating down the river when the rain took over the sewage systems and they had to open up the floodgates to let the pressure off the system. And then there was all the other things I was reading about and reading reports about, all the things you couldn't see, that the visible things that were in the water that really were even more vital and needed to be addressed than just the floaties.
Yeah, well, you dressed and shone light on significant issues to the water and to fisheries all across the country. And Lisa, if you want to play that next short video clip, because there's a really great thing that came out of the section that we did, or a great story that goes with that. So
it's something that I find personally reprehensible. And if you ask most people, I think they'd tell you that it's reprehensible. And yet we still allow this to go on. We quietly tolerate it. And I spend half my year usually out west. It's the same problem on the west coast.
Raw sewage.
Yeah, in Halifax, and it's just a practice that we've been able to that Mother Nature's been able to tolerate us doing for a long time, and she doesn't tolerate it so much anymore.
Yeah, and the great outcome of that, that was 2012.
Yeah,
that we filmed that.
First
and
story.
It's just this past year. I mean, I'm gonna say it. I've gone 15 episodes. There's only 2 people who've said shit on this program so far: Noah Clark and Gord Pizer. And if Gord Pizer can say shit on my program, he's the coolest guy I know. So I can say shit too. And what we were talking about eloquently there in the documentary was that we dump shit in our river every time it rains, and we had the Ontario side, the Quebec side, both antiquated ways to process waste, and we were dumping raw sewage into the river in downtown Ottawa. As a Canadian, it's just reprehensible, because it doesn't have to be that way. It's a choice, and then that's acceptable. And then just this last year, there is now a new system and a new solution in place to deal with that, isn't there?
Yeah, great big massive holding tank. I think the city of Ottawa and the federal government spent $250 million in about 10 years in engineering and building this thing. So basically it captures now all the overflow during these big flood events and holds it in this tank until it can be pumped over to the treatment facility and treated and then released. So it's good news on the Ottawa River for sure. The big culprit's been taken care of. There's a few little fires that still need to be put out here and there. But, across Canada, we're still talking about many, many, many examples where raw sewage is dumped into the river at different events at different times. And John, I've talked to people and they say, a little bit of poop in the river, hey, it fertilizes the weed beds and it's a good thing. Nutrients has to be in the water to make weed growth. But it's what's, everything else, right? Everything else. And I won't go too far because you get into that in the documentary, and I'm not going to give that away. But it blew me away. What you had to tell me in your story, it blew me away.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Where can people see this?
So it's going to be on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be the first time it's ever been web streamed, and we're going to do it from the Bluefish Canada YouTube channel, the Bluefish Canada. Thursday, it starts at 7 p.m. and then it'll be available there. This thing went around the world to festivals for over a year. Then CBC locked it up with a 3-year licensing exclusive contract for their doc channel. And that was I was very proud to have it on there, but it also meant the only place you could see it was on CBC doc channel, right? So now we can make it available free of charge to the public. and no charge, because really our charity is about informing, inspiring people to do it differently. And we need to, as we're sort of coming out of this crisis, we can go into another crisis where we throw the environment away and just focus on building and more industry and getting back up to speed economically really fast. Or we can do it the smart way and not sacrifice the environment and end up with a big shit show like the one you and I were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be done right. There's got to be eyes on the river, and kudos to people like you who shine lights on the problem and who find solutions to the problem. It's not just about bitching, it's about finding progressive solutions moving forward. So
yeah.
Fantastic, Lawrence. Just plug Bluefish. We just had bluefish.ca up there again. You do Bluefish Radio, the documentary. No shows for us. I'm used to seeing you at the shows as well, but
I know we're always at the shows, but we use those outdoor shows to test out our knowledge documents. We have a lot of scientists who give a lot of our time to fact check all our tips and guides for sustainable fishing. We have it for all the different species, best practices, over and above the rules. We're chairing the Great Lakes Fish Health Committee. We're doing a podcast every 2 weeks called the Bluefish Radio Show. We've been doing that now for 9 years. I think we're up to episode 331. We just did a big expose on Lake of the Woods. And then we put out the Bluefish News. So if you want to get the Bluefish News in your inbox every 2 weeks, it's all the fish and fish health and water quality news. Everything has to do with fishing. And I'm not talking, ocean fishing with big nets. This is all hook and line stuff. So check it out, bluefishcanada.ca. Get onto that newsletter, sign up for our podcast, and enjoy all the free resources there on the resource page. We got tons of stuff. And the YouTube, we got all sorts of great YouTube videos. Lisa just put the whole YouTube channel together for us a few weeks ago, organized all of it, and it's all there. We got some really cool stuff, including What Lies Below.
Fantastic, Lawrence. Again, I'm trying to squeeze a 45-minute guest into 10 minutes. My apologies to you, sir.
I gotta go.
A great job. Learn more about Lawrence. Go and see him at Bluefish, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it, man. And man, I still owe you for that whole thing you did. And, I owe you for a ton.
You don't owe me anything, man. I love hanging out with you. Can't wait to net a next fish for you.
No, man. Me too.
Okay. All the best. Bye-bye. I always have fun with Lawrence in the boat or hanging out with him at the shows. Getting on to the stars of our show. My apologies, guys. They're so worth waiting for. Cameras have been really lucky for me. I've been really lucky with cameras filming TV shows for a lot of years. And I am proud, very proud to say that I have filmed with Colin McEwen for, I don't know, going back almost 20 years trying to film the new Fly Fisher. And I say trying because I have failed with Colin on numerous occasions, on numerous different years, over and over and over, trying to hook a muskie, get the hook in the. It is a hard thing to do. So the footage that you see, a culmination of a lot of learning. Really proud of the episode that we did end up with, where we hit the mother lode and came across, I think, 11 or 12 muskies in a couple hours and hooked up a bunch of times. So go find that later. If you don't know the new Fly Fisher, it's produced here in Ottawa. It is the National Geographic of fishing shows. It sets a standard for composition, for sound, for editing, for special locations, and mostly for amazing fish content of fish caught on the fly. Bill Spicer is a guy who's been there from the beginning, I think, over 20 years. Bill's joining us from Hamilton. He's fished everywhere for everything in our country. He's caught a bunch of muskies in some really neat locations, including Lake of the Woods, some smaller lakes. He's an IFFF certified casting instructor. Bill is going to come and join us, talk to us about why muskies are the it fish, and Jamie Pastilli. I've been fishing with Jamie for over 20 years. He is the owner of Rising Sun Charters, a multi-species expert and a diversely experienced multi-species guy. Fishes a lot of neat fish and neat fish locations, including doing really well for muskies on the fly, This is a rising sun. Compliments of Jamie. He designed this for us in Musky Factory Baits. Jamie and I both guided at Canuck for Specs, Browns, and Bows. The former host of Big City Fishing, a regular guest on the new Fly Fisher now. And there's a picture of our two guys right there holding a spectacular Ottawa River gar caught on a fly, no doubt. Let's bring them in because we made them wait a long time for this. So are they still here?
Yeah, still hanging in.
Okay.
You're worth the wait, John.
I tried to make it up by saying a bunch of extra nice things about you guys at the start. So thank you for patiently waiting in the room. Why is muskie the it fish in the fly fishing world these days? How did that happen?
Probably because it's the hardest to catch. No matter if you're spin fishing or fly fishing, it's the hardest to catch. And everybody's looking for a new thing to do, and muskies just happen to be it.
Yeah, big, bad, extreme, hard to catch. Fly guys want to take something that's really hard to do and do it the hardest way possible. It just makes sense, right?
It's like a marathon runner that decides to start doing a triathlon and add a bunch of other sports because it's not hard enough, right? So it's
Exactly.
they're the baddest freshwater fish out there, and what a better way to catch them than target them on a fly rod.
The thrill when you do hook up, even if you don't land, if you hook up, it's incredible the amount of power that they have. And for such a ferocious fish, though, we got to be careful on how we handle them. I found that out real quick, that you got to be careful with them, more so than pike.
Absolutely. It's all about putting these fish back alive. We're all, we promote that over and over and over on this show. It's our fishery in Canada is naturally reproducing, so every single muskie matters. And we're going to look at your sport has evolved more than just about any other aspect of fishing in the last bunch of years. The equipment, the flies that people throw, how they tie flies, the size of the stuff you're throwing in the equipment. Tell us about this evolution.
Yeah, well, it started off as a trout fishing. It started off in England by a nun, and she started catching trout using feathers and a hook, and that's how it started. And for the longest time, it was thought to be only for trout, which it's for everything. I've caught everything from trout to tarpon on flies, barracuda. They're fun too, but all but trout. And most people believe that only fly fishing is topwater. Well, no, we fish the whole column of water like everybody else does. It's just that what we do is with simpler equipment, where we don't have an actual piece of machinery. We have a single action reel that we gotta sometimes be the drag, or somehow we got to assist it. And that's the appeal to me. It's how it's evolved is probably just people discovering they can catch other species on it. And I would think that probably the next species that people tried were bass. And they can be incredibly great on a fly rod. So from there it went on and became, well, let's try it for muskies. And for a long time, they say the fish of 1,000 casts. Well, in fly fishing, it's just about right.
It's probably worse.
Yeah.
The fish of 5,000 false casts.
Yeah, because we don't have the luxury of swimming lures, lures that make a lot of noise. Speed, we have to do that ourselves, and that's the difference. That's the appeal to me. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm just trying to give somebody another weapon in their arsenal. That's all. I'm not trying to say that I'm any better or anything. I'm not. Fishing's fishing, and I just love it.
Let's talk about the evolution of musky gear over the last 20 years. And you had a really good example earlier in the day, from your first rod that you ever threw for muskies to where we're at now. So what were you throwing 20 years ago? What are you throwing now? One of the knocks on fly guys from us gearheads is that, we everything we do is to have a short fight. So we need heavy gear. And one of the misnomers is that fly guys are using light gear. That might have been true while they were first learning 20 years ago. Not anymore, though, is it?
Let me explain something first for the people that don't really know anything about fly fishing. Fly rods are based on a number system from 1, or actually 0 to 15. 0 being for little tiny small trout, to 15 being for tarpon or sailfish. So anywhere in between there. Where musky fall is 9 or 10. And right now, this was my old musky rod here, and it's a number 9. You can see it. It's a single-handed rod. A lot of work to cast because everything's so heavy. When I was a younger man, no problem. But as I get older, I got shoulder problems and stuff like that. This becomes an issue. Now, what we've gone on to is two-handed spey rods. And there you can see the difference. We got a long handle. Look at the difference in the thickness of the rod itself. A lot more power here where we can actually cast. I can cast 80 feet, no problem with this. It's two-handed. I use two hands like this and cast. Much like you do with your musky rods, with your level winds. You're casting like that. I'm doing the same thing with the specialty line. Now, what hasn't really changed is the size of the reel. Size of the reel are big. Muskies will run line on you. Absolutely, they'll run. We don't have the luxury of the finer drag systems that you have in your spinning rods. There is a drag system in this, but it's not the same. We have to apply some of our own. So you need lots of room for line and backing. And what backing is just the old braided line that when we were kids, the black braided line, that's all backing is. And we attach it through knots to the fly line. Now, where the biggest improvement has come for the single-handed rod, for people still using it, we have what's called a power fly line. This one's a reel, and I'm not pushing anybody. It's just, this is set up for musky and pike, and it's tapered differently to turn over these flies. If you had a regular trout line, it would just collapse. You need something special. Now for the two-handed rod, I like a Skagit system. This is very short and very powerful. They use it out west for steelhead. It casts a long way with one back and one forward. It'll go a long way. So there's the difference there. Just different lines. Not all fly lines are created equal as far as musky fishing is concerned. You must get the proper tapers.
I think I think when I started musky fishing, if you look at technology over the last 25 years from a spinning point, I think in terms of fly fishing, the fly manufacturers, a lot of the different rod companies are actually making musky specific rods now. I just ordered 2 11 weights for this year, and you want to get the fish in quickly. You don't want to stress them out. And just like you wouldn't use a spinning rod with a big, huge believer or something like that, you got to use the right tackle for the right lure or the right fly, not only for performance, but also for, the safety of the fish.
Great point, Jamie, because that's one of the questions that we get, because there's new people call us all the time to go fly fishing. What weight rod should I have? I have a 9, and can I bring that in? We say no, you should probably have an 11. Maybe a 10 if you're really good, but an 11 weight rod. Preferred. You want to overpower that fish. You need to mitigate that fight and have a short fight. And, that's what's best for the muskies. Great question up there from Jim Horton. Question for Bill. What's your leader setup, particularly and I read slowly, so I missed the last part of the question.
Particularly when he talks leader to the bite tippet. This. Let's see if I can get it there. Rio's got it. It's there we go. Wire bite. This is knottable. This is 20 pound here. It goes 20, 30, or 40 pound. You can actually tie knots with it. I tie loop knots and go loop to loop, and then tie a regular clinch knot on my fly. Regular clinch knots, you don't have to do the improved clinch knot on these. It sticks. It's got a coating on it, so it sticks. Once you pull it tight, it's tight, and that's what I use right there. It's surprisingly well. I've never found a muskie that's particularly leader shy, because they're generally chasing the bait itself. So they just see the bait. They don't see the leader. So
I gotta say that bite wire stuff scared the daylights out of me as a heavy equipment guy for a long time. But that 40-pound bite wire, I have to say, I haven't seen it fail. A lot of the musky guys these days are tying with fluoro, with 80 or 100-pound fluoro, and making that work with their fly setups as well. Question on there for Jamie from John Roulette. I fished for trout, bass, Atlantic salmon, but never muskie. As a leading local fishing guide, do you have any tips for us musky newbies on how to cast those gigantic flies? Looks impossible.
It's not impossible. It is a lot of work, and I think it comes down to equipment. Like we said before, if you have the right setup for casting the big flies, it goes a long way. Like Bill said, the weighted, the fly line. I use a lot of 500 grain like heavy fly lines, which helps push the fly a lot further. That really helps, and also having. Even the double-handed rod that's a new evolution of musky fishing too, right?
That's more or less to save shoulders for me.
That too. It's like casting a pair of underwear all day. It's there's
nothing pretty about fly casting for musky. There's nothing pretty about it. Not like trout fishing where you see the lovely nice loops and long casts. That's not happening with muskies.
No, and as a guide, you get a lot of trout guys that go, "Hey, I want to do this," and they show up and they got their, little 4-weight, and they're used to, finesse. It's a totally different way to cast, and it's a totally different way to set the hook on a fish. When you're setting the hook, it's not like I went on a trip to Patagonia with my buddies, and I was doing the full strip strike on the trout, and the guys are yelling and swearing at me. And it's just, I kind of come from the other side of it, where when you're setting the hook on a muskie, instead of just pulling up and going tight, you need to strip strike. So you pull the line and then set it with the rod, which is really hard when you might get 1 or 2 chances a day at catching fish.
Yeah, the first several times I fished with Colin, we would work all day and we would get a nice, the beautiful start of the show fish, eat the bait off the side of the boat and not get a hook in it. And so, we did that several different days. It is, getting the strike and getting the hooks in. Do you guys use barbless when you're fishing for muskie? Yes. You're using single hooks, are you?
Sometimes I have one fly here. It's got tribbles on it. I tend not to, unless I have to, unless I'm having real trouble hooking, then I'll use this, only because they're a disaster to get out of a mouth. That's my feelings on them. But here, what happens with a single hook like that, the muskie bites and it gets turned sideways. And if you do a trout set, like just lifting up, you pull it right out of the mouth. If you do when it grabs the hook like that and turns, and you wait and you pull, then you pull it into the side of the mouth. That's generally what's happened by disciplining yourself to strip, then pull, rather than usual trout where as soon as you get a hit, you lift up. That's not what you want to do when you're musky fishing. Yeah. Bad.
Wow. And so that's talking about almost seeing the fish strike and watching that. And so we have some great footage. Maybe we should show right now of your casting technique. And so let's introduce that so people see the amount of work. And we can still talk during this.
This is a single-handed and got a sinking tip on it, and it's big fly, and it was tough.
And it's actually video, right?
Yeah.
I think Lisa's gonna hit play. No? Okay. How about a next video? We had a couple of videos we were gonna see.
Fish on. Oh, it's a good one. This is a really, really good musky. Oh, yeah. Oh. Yeah. Ah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, that's a decent musky.
Yeah, he'll have no trouble going. The water's cool.
Yep, and away he goes.
What you didn't hear there was my knees being put down on the bottom of the boat and a snap. Nice expensive rod right in two.
Oh no. That was during the fight?
No, when I was releasing the fish, when I kneeled down, I kneeled on my rod. Not a happy camper after that.
Yeah, Jeremy edited out all the F-bombs too, so it looked like a really smooth sequence as it was. You know, it's funny.
I never say those words.
The first time, one of the first times I fished with Colin, I threw flies, and I'm a fly hack. I said earlier, you know, I got some trout, some pike, some bass. I throw a bit of flies, but I'm a hack. And I was out with Colin's Orvis, one of his prized Orvises, throwing muskies the first time. I don't know what happened. The fly went into the electric, and it just pulled the front of the rod over and into the electric. So on the shelf over here, I was going to break it out, but Colin didn't make it on the show. So when he does, it's going to go in a frame down here. It's one of my proudest possessions. It's a piece of Colin's Orvis that's this big, and one that's this big, another one that's this big. And I'm going to put them all in a frame. And that's why Colin doesn't let me use his Orvises anymore in his boat. That's more expensive gear than our casting gear, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, an expensive Orvis rod would be $800 American.
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Bill, my wife's listening. Can you keep it down?
Yeah. Good for Jamie. He's a pro, and he gets deals. He gets wholesale. So. Nope. And how much is your reel? What's your reel brand, and how much is that?
Right now, I got Orvis reels, and depending on the reel, they're anywhere from $150 up to $750. And again, It gets down to whether you want to drive a Volkswagen or a BMW.
Okay, we tend towards the BMW stuff in the musky world as it is. So, wow. How important is clear water for you? And let's talk about finishing. There's two questions. And let's talk about finishing at the side of the boat. We catch a lot of fish at the side of the boat. You got a challenge with your fly rods. How do you do that?
If I have my druthers, I'd like a little stain in the water, only because fish will come closer to the boat then. Of course, muskie aren't afraid of anything, so not even the boat, but that's my feeling of it. Crystal clear water, you got to be spot on everything and position yourself away from the sun so you don't throw a shadow on the water and stuff like that. And everything like that you got to worry about. If you got a little stain on the water, and I'm talking a little stain, that to me is far better. I'm like that for most of my fishing. So
3 or 4 feet of visibility, is that what you're looking for, Jamie?
Somewhere where the fish can pick up the vibration, follow and find the fly, and that is enough. And then you see it like that last fish. I saw it coming, but that was sort of murky water. It wasn't.
Yeah, you could see that. You could see that fish coming from a ways. Colin sent us a couple pieces of video. Maybe we can do the two fish follow, Lisa, and then go right into the boat side strike. Those two might be good back to back, just to make things difficult and challenging for you behind the scenes in production. I'll just call stuff out, okay?
These are probably from Nielsen's.
Where's Nielsen's?
Yeah, Nielsen's is northwestern Ontario. You have to fly into it. It's probably the most musky I've ever seen in my life was there. Look at them. Yes, that's Nielsen's.
2 at a time.
Yeah, and look at the follow. That's the most frustrating thing. When I first started musky fishing, I thought to myself, "How do you do this? How do you do this?" And they'll just follow.
How many? 2 at a time. Wow, what fantastic footage. How many fish did you see on that trip?
In a week, I probably saw 25. And I'm not kidding you, 25 that followed closely. I had one, and I didn't realize how close it was to eating until we ran the footage back slow motion, and you see him flare his gills, open his mouth, then turn away. What made him turn away? I don't know.
Wow, that's just gets your heart going, because when you see the red, when you're looking down over top and you see the red of the gills, you're gonna get bit, you know.
Yeah.
Stay calm. Stay calm. It's just one more moment. Now this one is this the fish that eats at the side of the boat on the figure 8?
Think so. Might be. Yeah. Looks like he's coming up from below.
Slow motion coming up, and there's the turn.
Oh, that's Colin. Yeah, this is Colin. Whammo.
And there's the eat on the turn.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
We used to try figure eighting, but with the softer tips on a fly rod, a zero, doing it in an oval is better rather than a figure 8.
A lot of the rods now for muskie come with a longer. There's like a fighting butt and a longer handle too, so it makes doing your figure 8 or your O a lot easier.
Yeah. When I was doing this earlier, it was just with a single-handed rod. Now they got them specialty rods that are specifically set up, good and stiff, good. And, you got the power you need to set the hook. Yeah. Everything that you want, because fly lines tend to stretch too, so you got to have enough power to sink the hook into the fish's mouth.
Yeah, again, a challenge for you guys, and you've got single hooks. That's one of the 2 fail points in traditional musky fishing is getting the hook in the fish, and for you guys, I mean, even more. I'm amazed at how sharp your hooks are, though, how high quality they are.
Yeah, well, if you're going to go musky fishing, you better have something good. Yeah, because their mouth is hard. It's very hard to penetrate.
That's one of the biggest mistakes, all musky anglers make, is not having sharp hooks. You might get one chance, and I like to use a chainsaw file and really grind them down. And if they can stick in your fingernail, they can probably stick inside a muskie.
Correct. Yeah. And don't just sharpen once in a day. If you hit a rock or anything like that, sharpen hooks.
Yeah. Keep an eye. And after you get a fish too, it's good to look at your bait, make sure everything's working well and your leaders hasn't been damaged in any way.
Yeah. Important all along. Now let's talk about the evolution of the fly. And I got to throw a shout out to the Vizendis. I get to fish with some amazing fishermen from some amazing places. And this is Robert and David Vizendi from New York. They fish all over the world fanatically. They've got the musky bug bad the last couple of years, but I can't tell you how much the components in this fly cost and what an amazing work of art it
I want one.
Is. Well, these guys they seek out specific deer tails from specific regions, dyed specific ways. Their tying techniques are unique.
Makes a difference in quality of fly.
And there's something that you guys do as well. Reticulated flies, again, so that a fly can move around, and that's to increase. You can see the diff. Yeah,
some of them put in rattles like you guys do.
Yeah,
I don't have any with me right here.
Rattles, nice eyes on the front, and then the other thing, the techniques that you guys are using. One of the big differences between a fly and a regular bait is the amount of water it pushes. Muskie is a lateral line hunter. It's a sight predator first and foremost. And so, this is a sight bait. The one thing that flies have trouble with is moving water and creating vibration. But it's amazing how the tires have really learned to flare what they tie so that it even holds and so that it pushes water and it creates that vibration. So that's a really neat evolution. Talk about that.
That design also makes it go side to side like that, like a jerk bait. There you go. There's your red.
The reticulated makes it.
Yeah, it'll go with the flailing of the fur on the front, makes it go like a jerk bait. Just and like walking a dog.
And that walk the dog action is it's killer in fishing for just about everything. It's a real kill tactic for muskies. That's something that turns them on. We miss a lot of fish on top waters doing that, but the advantage with a fly is you rest your bait a lot of the time. Coming back, and flies fish when they're sitting too, don't they?
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of your favorite baits, John, is the suic, right? And it could be totally deadly in September when it's doing just that pause and slowly. Well, fly has the opportunity to suspend and slowly sit there in the water column. There's a misconception, like Bill was saying, that fly fishing is only on top water, but we use sinking lines, intermediate sinking lines, so you can get your fly exactly where you want it to be. And when it's in the strike zone, you just give it some smaller twitches and it'll stay there and hang there and get eaten.
Now,
and change direction. That's another good way to instill a strike.
Yeah.
I actually think that there's times in the year when a fly may even have an advantage over conventional tackle. Can you think of times
when the water's cold?
I guess looking at strengths or weaknesses, but when do you think a fly is most effective?
When the water's cold, when the fish are slow, they won't chase anything fast because they just don't have the energy. A slower moving presentation will do it. Basically, that's it. We generally opening week is when we get out there mostly with the flies. As the year goes on, the water warms up and it becomes more difficult for a fly fisherman. The fish start going deeper. Once they hit a certain depth, then fly fishing is just not practical. But generally, I find it when the water's colder.
I find too, when a lot of the spin guys are out throwing baits, it's nice to throw something different. The fish keep seeing one thing, and it's nice to throw a different pattern or a different color or different movement and get the fish excited. I'm sure the fish do get conditions with seeing spinners and bucktails and crankbaits all day, and sometimes adding something different to your arsenal can pay off.
Yeah, that's true.
Both of you hit on the answers that I was hoping you would, or that I would have thought. And now that cold water season that you hit on, Bill, I almost think that the flies, depending on the visibility in the river, because when you get to bad visibility, the flies are compromised more than anything else because you're not appealing to that lateral line, and it gets tougher. But when you got some visibility and you have schools of emerald shiners, your muskies hanging around them, having a bait that sits and suspends, that comes to rest near them, nothing is moving fast at that time, and that fly again is just, after you've pulled it, it still takes a while to adjust to the currents that you've created. And that's a time when I think a fly guy can trick a giant fish.
Yes.
Not just have an advantage, but you can fool a giant fish that hasn't been fooled by a fly before because they've seen everything else. And Jamie, your point on pressured muskies, I've done a couple of contributed to a few different fly fishing books on muskies. One was the Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing that Kip Veith put out last year. And, he's fishing Wisconsin, Minnesota a lot, and he's using flies for that exact reason, to show the fish something that they see much less, because there is so much pressure. They see so many double-bladed bucktails and so many jerk baits and so many, all the hard stuff, that the fly is something different for them. So yeah, pressured fish, cold water. What's bad visibility for a fly? When do you think we're getting in trouble for visibility?
2 feet.
You got to start
2 feet. Yeah. You got to have you got to be right on them.
You got to have a lot of confidence that the fish are there.
Right.
To throw in the water when you can't see like that.
Line or throwing a stump or whatever. You got to know the fish is there and put it right on top of them. That's the only way when you got colored water.
Yeah, electronics is helping really helping people find individual muskies, and that's going to be a big help for fly fishing as well. And maybe it'll help in slightly more stained water. When there's a fish there, it changes everything.
Yeah.
Tell me about fishing flies on Lake of the Woods. Is that the first place that you got going on muskies in good numbers, Bill?
That's where I became the most successful. There was I had tried it a number of times, but this particular lodge that I was at, it was run by 3 brothers. Crow Rock Lodge it was called, and the one guy was a Muskie guide, and he called Muskie his children. So this is how deep this guy was into it. He taught me a lot about color combinations and what to use when. I opened my box and I said, "Okay, you pick my flies." And he went boom, 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 and he was right on everyone. So I just picked his brain as much as I can. That's even back. The internet was just getting started big time back then, so we didn't have the information that is out there now. I had to go figure this out myself, and he was a big help to me, big help to me. And that's Lake of the Woods. Short of where we had the 2 muskie following, as far as numbers of success, I was getting, in the morning I get 3, sometimes 2, but all week. Every morning we went muskie fishing. Then in the afternoon we go bass fishing, and when the sun was up, and we'd mark off. The weeds were low, so we'd mark off with buoys where the weed line was, and then go along there and cast into it, and you'd see the shadow come out, and that anybody that's never done it, the shadow coming out and following you want to wet yourself. That's how exciting.
That's a really good thing in case people are having trouble interpreting that at home.
Yeah,
really good thing. So, Jamie, what about you fishing locally for muskies? And one of the things I like about you is you're an explorer. You and I have fished some, fishing in Canuck, some neat backwood lakes for trout, and you go chase muskies in some really small waters and little lakes in the Gatineaus too, right?
There's a lot of different opportunities out there you could look at. I don't want to give away my secrets. Whoa, hey. I don't want to give away my secret spots. But, I do spend a couple of weeks a year in the Kawartha Lakes. There's lots of smaller fish over there. We have caught some, 50-inch fish in there. But for the most size, they're between 32 and 34 inch. That one right there is a Kawartha fish. And they just have not seen fly pressure at all. That's where I got into musky on the fly. And I would spin fish during the day and then go out at the peak right before dark with my fly rod. And oftentimes that was when get it done. So kind of find the fish during the day and then close the deal with the fly rod. But and locally, Ottawa River is no secret. The fish are smart, they're big, but there are hidden gems within an hour, from the city. We have a lot of different musky waters that are definitely always worth exploring.
Absolutely. And, when you catch a muskie on a small lake, it's almost like it's twice as special. It doesn't have to be a big fish, and you can really get into some numbers in some of those places. If people knew how many lakes in the Gatineaus all the way up to Tremblant held muskies, they'd wet themselves, Bill. I think that's probably what that's probably what they'd want to do right there. What parts of your body do you wear out the most fly fishing?
Shoulders.
Shoulders,
because
do you fish both sides with the fly rod? You fish both ways?
I can, but not everybody can. But my right shoulder is a mess right now, but that's not from fly fishing. It was from weightlifting years ago. But most of it is this movement here. And when you're for a trout rod, you're just doing this, nice and easy. For muskie, you're way back here and you're really pushing it because you got such a heavy system. So that's what wears out the most.
It's also tough on the heart and soul.
Tough on the heart. Yes, it'll teach you about paying
right out.
It'll teach you about paying dues. There was a time about 12 years ago where I was going to go into musky fly fishing, and I took a friend, Dan Lougheed, out for a day, and I watched how hard he worked, and my shoulder already hurting from throwing conventional stuff. I just, at the end of that day, I said, that's a bad idea. No, I got enough parts I'm wearing out as it is. Jamie, what's the biggest fish? Let me preface this. It's hard to catch a big muskie, period. It's harder to catch a big one on a fly. I think the world record was caught in Minnesota last year, a 57.5. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
An insane fish and a great story because they hunted that fish for a few days. But what's the biggest that you know of around Ottawa? And if there's a fly fisher out there who wants to send a brag in right now, I'll encourage them to do that.
There's been a couple of 50s caught, 50, 51. I know in Montreal, Mike Lazarus has a couple of clients that he guides on the fly. He produces lots of big fish. I think it's just a matter of time. We do have some absolute giants here that somebody puts a 55 or 56 in the boat on a fly.
Yeah,
it'll happen.
I think that's coming soon enough too. When you said that Laz has some clients that he guides, I talk to Laz once in a while, man. It's so educational. I don't know if he does anymore. And his line was, I like catching fish, man. I don't take fly guys. Because Laz is intense and he needs those fish in the boat. He produces like nobody. And, it's a lot of things coming together. Lax Soul, 50 on a fly for Michael McNaught. There's a brag. Well done, Mike. Well done.
I've seen that beauty.
There's a 52 that I heard was caught on the Saugeen River by a guide, John Volk, on the Saugeen River. I've seen muskie on there, but not nearly that big. 36 inches to 38 inches would be probably the average size for that river, but there is some big ones, old fish.
I think I'm with Jamie. I think it's if maybe it's just because someone hasn't bragged about it already, but I think there's a 55 or 56 coming on a fly pretty quickly if someone hasn't done that already. And one, because the fish are there, but two, because the fly guys are getting better and better and better at their game, and there's way more of them. It used to be so rare to see a fly guy out on the river, and now most days maybe, at least every few days and at least every week, we see them as well. So you too, Jamie, for gar, is that an it fish for the fly world?
Not really. It's more of the musky guys, but with the internet, people see photos and things like that, and they go, "Wow, that's something I want to try." Right? So
a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a couple of great days, Bill.
When it's 100 degrees out.
Yeah, again, that's a sight fishing adventure. Really fun way to do it. What haven't we touched on for muskies on the fly that we should? What are we missing?
We top water. We deal with top water stuff right here. If you can see this is it's called a swing hips, and it pull it along the top. It's concave there. It's just the popper, but it goes backwards and forwards like this, and makes a lot of noise. It's about 12 inches long. Lots of flash on it. That's one. Tarpon poppers, the saltwater tarpon poppers. I've had a lot of luck with these.
Oh, nice.
I haven't got anything huge, but I've got muskie on them. And believe it or not, this is probably the best one, and it's a bumblebee. I don't know why. Maybe they think it's a bumblebee. I don't know. But when you pull this across the top, it gurgles and it makes a complete big pop, and it's very, very, very noisy. So that's another area you can get into. Again, with poppers, I try them out first before you disturb any of the water. Hit it with poppers and then go subsurface, rather than the other way around. You go subsurface, you disturb the fish. They're not looking up any longer. They're looking down. So you want them to look up. That would be my advice on that. As far as, and I wanted to mention one more thing. This wire bite tippet, I put at least 18 inches of it. I was putting 12 to 14. I got bit beyond it once, and right in two, bit beyond it. So that's what can happen. So at least 18 inches of it. And like I said, it doesn't interfere with the fly. It doesn't interfere, and it doesn't spook the fish. A lot of people say, well, the leader will show. Well, they're chasing the fly. They're not chasing the leader. The leader is ahead of the fly. They can't see it. So I've never had a problem like that. So 18 inches of wire bite tippet. Your favorite knot, which to me is a simple clinch knot, is enough on this because it's got a plastic coating on it and it sticks. And I've never had one come off. So there's my advice.
I got some advice too. Before you head on a trip, whether you're going by yourself, you rented a cottage, or you're going out with a guide, practice your casting. You see they have driving ranges for golfers to go and practice before they actually play a game. You can't see it enough that people show up. They haven't cast in a year. They've never casted a fly bigger than, a woolly bugger before, and they don't know what they're doing. They waste half their day kind of learning how to cast. So I think trying to get some gear and practice beforehand. I know in the Florida Keys, some of the guides won't even take you fishing if you can't cast 60 feet off the dock. It's not even worth it for them. They make you cast before you go on the boat. I'm not strict like that, but you know, you have to make the most of your day, and it could be pretty frustrating if you know you can't put a fly where it needs to go.
That's some really good advice and good points right there, Jamie. If you're not proficient, if you can't cast out 60 feet, and if you can't be confident that you can really rip a bait back to the boat, because that speed is such an important factor in turning a fish on and in getting a bite in the musky world, more than for any other fish. And so if you can't at least in bursts make that fly dance and fly through the water, it's not going to happen for you. And so, you know, I've taken guys out who won it, and you know that they're not good enough, and you know that the one chance is the fish just came in and had a look, and you didn't have it going on the same way as, you know, as you were showing us with those fish underwater. So you know, on the double follow, Bill. So, you know, it's not a starter fish. It's one that you work your way up to for sure.
Not a starter fish. One technique that we do use to quicken up our retrieve is once that you cast, you put the rod under your arm and use both hands and pull it in like this. And then you can really go fast. And then that gives you a double whammy here. As soon as something hits it, you pull. You're doing the right technique, pulling, and then you're going to lift. So it's like this, just hand over hand. Striker fisher, the guys that fish stripers on the coast, that's the technique they use.
Yeah, except that after you're done doing that, you've done your three big bows to get it out there, and then you rip it all the way back, and then you do your big circles at the side of the boat, and just repeat it another 1,300 times, and you're game on.
That's why I've gone to a two-handed rod. With this specialty line, I pick it up. I strip out what I want onto the floor of the boat. I pick it up once, back, and fire it, and then I let go, and it all shoots out. It's much easier for the guy that's getting on in years and little old of tooth like me.
Yeah, and we get smarter. Technique, you know, it's all about technique as we get older, isn't it, Bill? Everything in life. So,
yes. And then you add things like wind.
Yes,
that's a whole other half an hour. I just saw Al's comment, if we can keep going till 9:30 when his wife goes to bed. And greetings to Bunker up in the north, buddy. Hope you're doing well.
Fantastic. Al, dude, hey. Fantastic. You know what? I got Brent Bochek. I'm making everybody wait today. You guys were so patient and so good. You know, it's easy to see why this is the it fish in the fly fishing world. Bill, thanks for being the ambassador that you have in the fly fishing world for as long as you have, and just keep doing it, man. Keep doing it. I love the new Fly Fisher. One of the best looking shows on TV for a long time. So seeing both of you guys there, Jamie, I get to hang out with you every year. Can't wait again till this spring, my friend. You and I will share a boat together. Let's put Jamie's contact information up on here. If you want to get out with Jamie, Rising Sun Charters, flies, gar, exotic locations in Eastern Ontario and Western Quebec, you know, the off the beaten trail stuff. He's your guy. Thanks a lot, guys. Pleasure. We'll see you again soon.
Good to see you again. Cheers.
All the best. And we're back on time at 8:40 with Brent Bochek. Look at that. Wow.
How are you, John?
How's that, Brent? I just kicked off the big TV guys to get you in here, my friend. I hope you're feeling special. You are a big TV guy now, though, aren't you?
Well, I don't know a big TV guy, but we got our show going, and we're having a lot of fun with it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're working on it. We're working on it and having fun with it. Absolutely. And it's great watching you grow. Lisa's got a clip to entice people to jump on your link in a moment or two. So, Lisa, if you want to play this, and Brent and I will come back in just a second.
It'll happen. Beautiful day. It's a musky day.
If you're a musky fisherman, sharpening hooks is just part of what you do. You work so hard for chances that we sharpen every hook every day. Keep casting. You need another Advil? DSI bait. I love those. Oh! I just got robbed. And there is what we've been working so hard for. You know, if I think about that fish, I can almost not feel the numb toes I have and the frozen fingers. Oh, fish!
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. John, we did it. Unfreaking believable. There we go. There she goes. Dark out, we got spotlights going, and we got ourselves another big old Ottawa River muskie.
That was a fun weekend together, Brent Pochek, and that was a Hail Mary muskie at the end, wasn't it?
You pulled it out at the end, John, getting us on one of your favorite spots there. And I called you the other night after I watched the episode, and it was so much fun. Like, I always have fun when I'm fishing, but those couple days we spent together in the boat, the day with the half day with Lisa and then the 2 days with yourself were just some of the most fun I had in the water. And even though we struggled the first day and a half when you and I were out, we still had that PMA, that positive musky attitude. We were still having fun, and we just kept working, and it paid off.
Hey, not catching muskies is just part of what we do. I'm never going to live this down forever because it's on film. Lisa goes out and makes a muskie show in a half a day, and then you and I go out and we get butt kicked for a day and a half. But we sealed the deal at the end, and 2 fish in 2 days. I couldn't be happier. What a great weekend! And that's muskie fishing, isn't it?
But it absolutely is. But it also tells a story. And the way, I got to give a big shout out to Dan from Love to Fish, who does the filming and the editing, and he does such a great job putting everything together and telling a story with it. And what people will notice when they watch this show is, they'll see us, the first part there, the first day in that, we may not be catching fish. We're not getting fish after fish. But in our conversations, there's just so much information that is shared there that people can really pick up on.
I wrote early in my notes to throw a big shout out to Dan from Live to Fish, and I went right past it because that's how organized I am a lot of the times. But I wanted to throw a big shout out to him. I've got to share a boat with a lot of different cameramen over the years. He's a lot of fun, and he's really good at what he does, and he's just getting going on the muskie thing. So you got a good man there. Great work, Dan. What a fun show, and you made something really special. Congrats on the success of setting the hook, a multi-species, your own YouTube channel, and the link to the premiere is coming up in the comments, which I think is right now in 4, 3,
See you
2, 1. You have a great show, my friend.
Thank you. Take care, John. Thanks for having me on.
All right. All the best, Brent.
Where's my mouse?